present in the meeting. Councillors Allison. Councillor Anderson is in the process of joining us, having some IT issues at the moment. We have present Councillors Brown, Carmichael, Chalmers, Clark, Convery, Cooper, Cowan, Devlin, Fagan, Ferguson-Miller, Frame, Keat, Kerr, Lambie, Logan, Loudon, McCallan, McClymont. We have apologies from Councillor Leslie MacDonald and Councillor Cowie is substituting. We have present Councillor McLachlan. We have apologies from Councillor Nelson and Councillor Hose is substituting. And we have present Councillors Ray, Razak, Robb, Ross, Shearer and Walker. And I'll hand back to the Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Come to item 1, which are declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? There are none. Can I come to item 2, which are the minutes of the previous meeting? Are there any questions on the minutes of the previous meeting? And can I come to Katie Loudon?
Thanks very much, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I've got a couple of questions around the minute on the Pride in Place funding, which is about page 7 and page 8 on our notes today. So the first question was we had, as an executive committee, instructed the Chief Executive to write a letter to the UK Government. Can I ask if that has happened and if we can be provided with a copy?
Okay, I'm going to come to the Chief Executive.
Right, thanks, Councillor Loudon. The letter has been written and through the Chair I'm happy to provide a copy. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions, Chair.
Sure.
Is it? Thank you. So it was incredibly disappointing news that Rutherglen constituency was the only constituency out of the 4 covered in the South Lanarkshire area that is receiving nothing from this funding at all. There's no, in the bid that has been submitted from the council, there's no areas in Rutherglen, Cambuslang, Blantyre, Halfway that have been identified. I'd like to just refer back, because it doesn't actually say in these minutes, but referring back to the original paper as it was presented at the exec on 5.4 at that paper, it says that the councillor were being asked to identify at least 1 or more potential neighbourhoods for each of the 4 eligible UK parliamentary constituencies. What has happened here? Or was that simply not explained correctly in that original paper? So the original paper which we had to exec said that at least 1 neighbourhood was going to be identified in each of the 4, and that is clearly not what has happened.
Yeah, no, the issue, no, that is what has happened. I think this relates to the data zones that are provided, but can I maybe come to Jackie to expand on that?
Thank you. The guidance that we were given indicated those high level of deprivation and social infrastructure areas, so we were actually advised which were eligible constituencies. So the submissions that we've made were in relation to those eligible constituencies, if that helps clarify the matter.
It doesn't particularly, but thank you. My issue is it says in the wording of the original paper is each of the 4 eligible UK constituencies, suggesting that all 4 are eligible. Perhaps it's a moot point, so I was simply trying to understand what had happened there. I would like to thank Jackie for, I know that you've replied to Maureen as our group leader after she'd made some points around Rutherglen and Cambuslang, Rutherglen constituencies, it's called at Westminster, not being included. And I would just like to know what, if we had any, if either, since we've not seen the letter from the Chief Executive yet, whether there was any pushback in that letter or whether there was any further pushback in the response that we put out. And I'll explain why, if you give me a second. So, as it says in the response that Jackie's since provided, as it says in that original paper, when these data zones were being identified, they were being identified using SIMD figures and they would be identified using CNI figures. Now, obviously, I'm trying to understand what's happened here for the benefits of the community in the constituency I live in, the community that I represent. So CNI's Community Needs Index, which looks at 3 separate domains, one of them being connectedness and one of them being civic assets within an area, and that's all weighted equally. The latest that the data would have been collected in the CNI seems to be at the start of 2023. Now, that's not particularly easy information to find, but I have. So it's the start of 2023. If we're thinking about the Rutherglen constituency, Westburn Hall, Eastfield Community Centre, Tact Hall, Halfway Hall, Cambuslang Library, Halfway Library, Blantyre Library. Council has withdrawn from all of these assets. They're all at slightly different phases. This all happened after 2023. So all of those figures that are in that CNI data do not reflect any of the experience of the constituents, the residents who are living in these areas and have experienced these losses and this upheaval. Have we had any pushback as a council on the use of that data, which is a couple of years out of date and doesn't reflect the reality of the situation on the ground for residents in that constituency?
Right, I'm going to maybe come to pick up the points about the letter and the data, because I don't think that has been understood at this point. There are a list of constituencies. There are constituencies that are deemed eligible on the basis of the data zones provided by the government. And Jackie, just keep me right here if I've got that right. I can't think of the names of all the constituencies off the top of my head, but the Rutherglen constituency did not fall into the number of constituencies that were included in that data. So do you want to just clarify that?
That's correct. The information we were given identified 9 high-need areas, and that has been reflected in the submissions that we've made. So it was those ones that were identified through the calculations that were provided to us.
Right, and I think the bit that's been lost here is we have, I can't think of the names of all the constituencies. We have a Rutherglen constituency, an East Kilbride-Strathaven constituency, a Hamilton-Clyde Valley constituency, we have a Dumfriesshire, Clydesdale and Tweedale constituency, and we have this Motherwell and Carluke constituency. So I think that's where the confusion is coming from. We have 5 constituencies that cross the South Lanarkshire area, not 4. In terms of the pushback, that is something that we have written to and on the instruction of the committee, and also that's an issue we are pursuing at COSLA. Indeed, I think the motion that was agreed at the committee last time reflected in large part the spirit and wording of what was done at COSLA. There's concerns about the scheme itself and the way it's been applied. We obviously welcome investment where it's coming into South Lanarkshire, and the proposals that we did put forward were shared with all group leaders in advance, I should say that, and that is what was put forward. These are questionnaires that we were asked to submit by the Scotland office and by the UK government. Right.
Mm-hmm. So just to, one final question on that, Chair, to just pick up on something you said there, if that's okay. So you were saying that this was done on the basis of data provided by the UK government. It was my understanding that, as you say, we did come to a shared position, more or less, at the last executive, where we asked the Chief Executive to write to express our concerns about that very methodology. And that's what I'm asking about. That's what I'm not convinced. It would be really great to see that letter from the Chief Executive as soon as we possibly can. So I'm not convinced that there has been much pushback from this council, from this administration, on that methodology being used, because as I've just illustrated, especially for the Rutherglen constituency, that methodology is relying on data that's at least a couple of years out of date. And I would have hoped that the council has strongly pushed back on that. Thank you very much.
Chief Exec.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Loudon. The letter that's come back is as reflected in the minute. So what I was asked to do, and it's reflected in the minute, is to write to the Secretary of State for Scotland in the terms outlined above. So you can see, the content of the letter is as per the minute that you've got in front of you. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Can I come now to Ross Clark?
Thank you, Chair. 2 points on the previous minutes. First of all, more quickly, I think it's under item 9, where we had that agreed amendment cross-party. Thank you to Tracy, who'd emailed both Councillor Robb and I to check the wording of it. I think I'd gotten back to her just as the minutes were being finalised and the papers for this meeting being sent out. I was to say that the just one bit missing. We had agreed that the investments, I'll get it up here, the above investments will prioritise but not be limited to town and village centres as guided by service requirements. It's one bit that's missing from that agreed amendment, but understand that that's been sent to David Booth, and that's understood. Second part, following on from Councillor Loudon's questions on the Pride and Place submissions, and thank you to Jackie for circulating them to group leaders. Just on the Hamilton and Clyde Valley submission in particular, I understand Hamilton Town Centre being the main submission for that constituency. There's a couple concerns about that. Of course, it's a Hamilton and Clyde Valley constituency, and there isn't a Clyde Valley submission as part of that submission. I can understand why that's been done that way, because I would assume that the council are trying to address the Clydesdale part of that constituency through the other constituencies, and that's the way it's been done that way. But I understand from the high need zones in that constituency are Hill House and Struther Hill. Not entirely sure that they are as connected to the town centre as we might like them to be. Of course, from a ward point of view, you've got Struther Hill, which I think would have been an ideal candidate for the funding, considering it's got an already very active and successful OPOP group, which that money could have went through, and the fact that Larkhall also has a town centre which could have served as some sort of anchor area. So just to make that point in relation to that fund, if any clarity can be provided on that, then that would be good. But just to make that point in terms of Larkhall and the Hamilton Clyde Valley submission.
Okay, I'm maybe going to look to Chief Exec to respond to that.
Okay. In terms of the clarity that you're after, Councillor, could you maybe just give me a wee bit more detail on that?
I suppose there's not so much more clarity to provide. I suppose you're just making that point that there is some concerns around that, but I understand the reason behind the council submission. If there is any more reason in which you can provide around the going with Hamilton Town Centre for that, then great. But I understand it's because it was seen as the anchor area for the Hamilton areas.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. There was significant detail that's been provided through group leaders, right? I think 5 working days prior to the submission being made, and then on the day of the submission, we provided a complete record of all of the data packs that have been submitted. So that gives a rationale in terms of the bids that had to be made through a funding scheme that wasn't of our devising. Right? So if there are elements within that you'd like me to go through, or like my officers to go through, I'm happy to put aside time to do that. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. So before we just... Well, can I just... Are there any questions on the minutes itself? I don't see any other questions on the minutes itself. Can I just make the point then? The Council and the Committee has unanimously agreed that we do have some concerns about the way this funding stream has been allocated, and we have relayed them in the terms that we agreed unanimously at the last meeting. The Council has submitted a number of proposals, and again, we have done that, having checked those proposals on a cross-party basis with all the group leaders. So as far as I'm concerned, we are moving in lockstep together in terms of where we go next with the Pride and Place Fund. And when it comes to pushing back against underfunding for this area, that is what this administration does every week. Because every week and every month that this administration has been in existence, we have been underfunded by the Scottish Government. And of course, I'm sure we'd all welcome the record settlement that's been delivered to Scotland. Can I ask us to agree the minutes as a correct record? Agreed. With the revision Councillor Clark has made? Agreed. We are agreed. Thank you very much. I'll come now to item 3, which is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report, and I'll come to Jackie Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. This is our regular Revenue Budget Monitoring Report, taking us to the 3rd of October this year. Section 4 summarises that we are projecting a break-even position for the year. And from Section 4.3 onwards, we have some updates on some budget areas. Firstly, pay award at 4.3, just to note that the teachers' pay award has now been agreed. That's in line with the funding assumptions that I've reported to committee before. At 4.4, just a reminder on the decisions that were taken at the last committee around the packaging extended producer responsibility funding and the use of £2.5 million that will be used by community and enterprise resources towards one-off investment in waste and recycling. The rest of the funds will be used to support the Council's budget gap going forward. The housing revenue account position is summarised at section 5 of the report, and again it's projecting a break-even position for this year. As always, the appendices include figures for both general services and for HRA. And in terms of recommendation, we're asking that the position for both of those accounts be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on this report? Could you please indicate now? I'm not seeing any questions, so can I draw us to the recommendations and ask that we agree the report? Agreed. We're agreed. Thank you very much. Can I come now to item 4, which is a capital budget monitoring paper, and again back to Jackie Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our capital budget monitoring report for the same period to the 3rd of October. Section 4 summarises the position for the General Fund Capital Programme. We have a programme of £67.7 million. That includes some proposed adjustments that I'll cover in a second, and they are detailed at Appendix 1. Firstly, though, just at 4.3 on the top of page 24, a reminder around a project that we had approval for at last Executive Committee in November around the first stop temporary accommodation. So that has also been added into the programme as part of the figures I've just reported. Our actual spend position is detailed at section 4.7. We've spent £17.6 million to the 3rd of October. And the housing capital programme is detailed at section 5 of the report. £87.7 million is our housing capital programme for the year. And again, we're looking at maximising spend on that programme this year. Actual spend to the 3rd of October is £33.1 million. In terms of those adjustments that I mentioned a second ago, Appendix 1 on page 26 details those. Firstly, for community and enterprise resources, just some adjustments to reflect timing of spend on the Transformation Fund programme. Firstly, Dolan Aqua Centre Pool Lifeguard Technology, £200,000 of that project will spend into 26-27. And on the accessibility project, now that we've had the finalisation of the procurement of the front of house system for leisure, we know that the spend profile for that project will include £754,000 into 26-27. And on the Nature Restoration Fund projects, due to no bids being received for the woodlands management element of that project, £200,000 of that project will now spend into 26-27. Some projects in education resources. Firstly, Kirkstell's ELC. There is some works around extending the size of the hard-standing playground. Again, spend profile shows that £73,000 of that budget will spend into 26-27. And in Carluke High School, we have some improvements that are funded from developer contributions that will include ICT provision, and the spend profile there is detailed at the bottom of page 26, with £209,000 of a £219,000 project being spent in 26-27. On the top of page 27, we are including some information around our secondary schools programme that was reported to Executive Committee a few months ago. We now have the profiling in place following procurement, and we expect that £1 million of that programme will spend in 26-27. The final item in that appendix is that first stop temporary accommodation project I mentioned a second ago. So taking you back to the recommendations, we're asking that the position for General Fund and Housing Capital Programmes be noted, that the adjustments in Appendix 1 is approved, and just to note that the programmes will continue to be monitored by the Financial Resources Scrutiny Forum. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Jackie. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? Could you please indicate now? I don't see any questions, so can I draw us to the recommendations and ask us to agree the report? Agreed. We're agreed. Thank you very much. I'll come now to item 5, which is an update on funding, and ask Jackie Taylor to speak to this report. Thank
you, Chair. So again, regular report. This report is detailing at Appendix 1 the additional funding that we have received in the last period. It's £138,000 being reported. This is in relation to discretionary housing payments. It was our share of a national allocation that has come in. So £138,000 in revenue funds. And at section 3.4 of the report, you can see the update in relation to Pride in Place, in relation to the questionnaires that were submitted in line with what we've talked about earlier today. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? I'm not seeing any, so can I draw us back to the recommendations and ask us to agree to note the report? Agreed. We're agreed. Thank you very much. We'll come now to item 6, which is a paper on employee workforce monitoring information, and Michelle Milne is going to speak to this item. Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. This is a regular report that comes to Committee on Workforce Monitoring Information, and this covers the period from April 25 to September 25. I've I take committee to the bottom of page 35 at section 4 on attendance statistics. The council's average absence rate for that period was 6%, which is an increase of 0.1% when compared to the previous year. In terms of the breakdown of that, in terms of AP, T and C staff, the annual average was 6.2%, which was an increase of 0.2%. And for teaching staff, this was 3.8%, and this was an increase of 0.2%. In terms of manual workers, this was 7.9%, which was an increase of 0.1%. And you'll see in the paragraph below that, at the top of page 36, if I combine musculoskeletal and psychological conditions, there was an increase of 3,785 days. And if I combine the other two areas in the bullet points at the bottom for stomach, bowel, blood and metabolic disorders and respiratory conditions, there was a decrease of, in total, 3,543 days lost. You'll see at section 5, under occupational health, the number of referrals that we have detailed in this section, and two areas to highlight there in terms of employee support. There was 945 employees referred, and that was an increase of 159, and 68% of these referrals related to personal issues. In terms of council referrals, there was 268 referrals, which was a decrease of 56. And for cognitive behavioural therapy, there was a total of 152 employees, and that was an increase of 127 employees referred. Again, accidents and incidents at section 6. There was 939 in this period, which was a decrease of 38. Moving on to section 7, which is at the top of page 37, there was a total of 109 disciplinary hearings which were held across resources, and that was an increase of 38 when compared to the previous period. And in those cases, action was taken in 103 of those. Under employee development at section 8, you'll see at the second bullet point, there was 3,594 attendances at classroom learning and development events. That was a decrease of 1,546 during the same period, and there were 526 attendances at virtual classroom learning. Overall, employees have successfully completed 40,590 e-learning packages. That was a decrease of 11,339. And the reasoning behind that was to do with the introduction of the new employee system, which covered HR, finance and procurement. And there was an intensity around the training delivery for all employees to make sure they could use and access the system at that time. You see at the bottom of page 37, section 9, we obviously do exit interviews. And if I turn over the page there, at the top of page 38, you'll see that our labour turnover figure is 3.5%, and that was a decrease of 1.3%. In terms of exit interviews, they were held with 28% of leavers, and that was an increase of 15% from the previous period. And I'll just summarise a few elements of the recruitment monitoring information at section 10. We had 886 applicants who declared themselves as disabled. 444 were shortlisted for interview and 43 were appointed. This is an improvement when compared to the same period last year, where 177 applicants declared themselves as disabled and 8 were appointed. Of the 1,471 BME applicants, 425 were shortlisted for interview and 30 were appointed. And that compares to 601 applicants for the same period, of which 106 were shortlisted and 14 were appointed. You will know that work is ongoing to increase ethnic minority representation, and as part of the work of the Employee Equalities, Diversity and Inclusion Forum, an action plan was approved earlier in the year to prioritise this work. That is also aligned to the outcome of the Mainstream and Equality Action Plan with outcome 1. The aim of this is to increase the number of successful BME candidates being appointed in the council. And you see there's a number of improvements I've listed under there that have taken place already, and some of the additional ongoing work that we have in place there as well as part of that action plan. At the last bullet point, you'll see that 132 applicants declared themselves as veteran, 40 were shortlisted for interview and 6 were appointed, and this compares to 30 applicants for the same period last year, 9 being shortlisted and 1 being appointed. I would refer committee back to section 2 of the report to approve the following recommendation to note the content of the report around employment information, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Michelle. Can I ask if there are any questions? Could you please indicate now? And can I come to Ross Lambie?
Chair, just a quick couple of questions. On the exit interviews, we're still down in the sort of 25–28% range, which strikes me as quite low, because it's really interesting to find out why people want to leave the council so we can understand how we can make it better to work here. And the reason I mentioned it today is because it came across my desk that I think we have around 150 grievance investigations going on at any one time, roughly. And I wonder if that's true. Is that a kind of backlog, or is that normal? We have that kind of number. So yeah, those two things combined, I'm just worried that maybe people are leaving because grievance processes are delayed. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I'll ask Michelle to respond to that and see if there's any insights you can offer. Michelle?
So in terms of the exit information, I know that we have talked about this at previous committees as well. There is an automatic process in place for that, which we had changed previously, where employees are directly contacted in terms of carrying out an exit interview. They get a link to do that, and it is followed up with their manager. So that is very much employee-led in terms of them participating in the process. We absolutely do encourage that. In terms of the grievances, and probably generally what I would say about that data under Section 7, so there was 16 grievances during that 6-month period, which was an increase. And what I would say about all of these matters, whether it's a discipline, a grievance, a dignity at work, they are all employee-led. So it's a reaction to employee behaviour, conduct, or an issue that they may have, and we follow that through to make sure that we understand it and we deal with any issues that come out as a consequence of that.
Ross?
Just thanks for that. So the 150 any one time, is that, just to confirm, that's kind of what we're dealing with? You guys have got that on your plate. And then the reason I'm asking really is, do you guys feel that you've got enough resource in your team to deal with that volume? Thanks.
Okay. So, Michelle, I'll come back to you, and but I would just look at sort of Section 7 and some of the figures there as well myself. But because I think the figure we've got in that period was 109 disciplinary hearings, but the number of grievances was a lot lower. But Michelle, I'll pass back to you.
Yeah, you're right. So there's a number of elements to that section. We do have the resources to be able to deal with that. It is employee and or manager led, so we have to pick that up as and when it comes in. Probably the point to note, so there is a split in those activities. It's 109 disciplinary hearings, and there was obviously a reduced number in terms of grievances. And you'll see the time to complete our target is 6 weeks, and we've stated in there that that can be about availability of parties, if someone is unwell, changing dates, annual leave, etc. But it's also very much to do with the complexity of the cases. So some cases are more straightforward and simple. They might involve one person, one incident. Other cases might involve multiple people, multiple incidents, and we just need to make sure that we do a thorough investigation in any of these cases in terms of taking them forward.
Okay, thanks. I think the figure I was looking for there was just there were 16 grievances raised during the monitoring period there. Can I come to Alec Allison?
Thanks, Chair. Just looking for a wee bit more clarity. Jackie, after the leaders' meeting, had responded that in terms of our absence levels, we are 17th, I think it was, you said, Jackie, out of all the councils, which is midway. But compared to private business, we're significantly higher. Yet we contribute significantly towards getting staff back to work and give them a great deal of support. Why are our figures not better?
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
I will try and respond to those questions. If I miss any points, please do come back to me. So in terms of the figures, I would pick up the local authority private sector comment that you'd made first, just in terms of all local authorities follow national terms and conditions agreed at COSLA, and private sector companies will have their own arrangements in terms of terms and conditions. So for example, in terms of sick pay, that is available for employees within the council, and it may be available for longer periods. So some of the terms and conditions that are available in the private sector, if people are off sick, sometimes get no pay initially, or they don't have pay for longer periods of time. So there are differences between the two sectors in terms of how terms and conditions are applied, and therefore how different employers will deal with managing absences. In terms of the point that you make about the private sector, and I suppose other public authorities as well, just in terms of where our absence figures are sitting, we were in the last data that we have available through statutory performance indicators, which come through local government benchmarking framework, which ranks authorities, and that counts days lost as opposed to percentage figures. And percentage figures can change depending on the number of employees that you happen to have in and what you're comparing that to. So we are ranked 17, and that was a positive position. So we had an improved position to get to 17 in the previous years. What I can also say in terms of other public sector bodies, so if I look at Lanarkshire, that's the one that I'm familiar with at this minute in time. If I look at that same data, they were sitting at 6.81% across all of Lanarkshire. I know that they too have problems. So I would say across Scotland, all local authorities are experiencing similar difficulties in managing absence in terms of the figures and where they sit. What I would say is that in terms of our trend, we are looking comparatively better than others in terms of where we have increased, although our figure is sitting higher than we would want it to be. What I would also say is we've had a big focus on this in the last 18 months in terms of analysis of the data, splitting that up into lengths of absences, looking at conduct, capability, ill health, retirements, because there's many factors involved in this, and what additional supports we can give to employees in terms of our health and wellbeing activities, and to managers who are managing the absences. And within personnel as well, we do a lot of activity around kind of case management with particular cases where they're complex. So there is a lot of activity going on around managing absence, supporting employees and supporting managers in terms of how they do that.
Alec?
Yeah, quite a long answer there. So do we then have a target within all that as to where we want to get our staff to? I'm not suggesting we get staff back to work that are not able to work, but I think it is also important that we make effective use of our return to work strategies, and if they are not getting staff back to work quickly enough, what can we do differently?
So in terms of that, we are very active around supporting employees to get back to work as soon as they are able to do that and they're well to do that. We also have other activities like a phased return to work if somebody can do that in terms of reintegrating them back into the workplace, particularly if they've had a serious illness or a serious condition where tiredness, etc., can play a factor in that. And it's about reintegrating them back into the workplace as soon as we possibly can. We also have a number of an approach around reasonable adjustments if someone has a disability in terms of supporting them back into the workplace. So we are doing all of those activities. We look at it on a detailed basis in terms of individual cases as well as across services and across resources. We look at any factors that we can do within that. So we are absolutely doing everything that we can in terms of getting people back to work as quickly as they possibly can be, and also supporting them when they're off and they're unwell.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Margaret Walker?
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Chair. Can I just make a kind of general point around that? One of the reasons that people have longer and higher sickness levels is the fact that they can't get access to medical treatment, to hip replacement, to physio, issues relating to, access to GPs. There's a whole plethora of socioeconomic reasons around this. And as you were saying, that is common certainly across Scotland. Even with younger people, who can't access, either the surgery that they need or if it's mental health treatment. Obviously we are keen here, and we have excellent employment models supporting people getting back to work, particularly with mental health issues. and with, you know, a greater level of funding, which, as you were saying, Chair, through the Barnett consequence, we're going to get through this budget, one of the highest contributions ever, in addition to the previous Barnett consequential contribution, which was the highest since the war. Then if that could be devolved to local authorities and we could actually provide these mentoring and supported employment projects, we could start to ensure that people did get the treatment that they needed timely and that they could get back to work. But this is a whole load of reasons why people are off longer, why more have mental health issues around cost of living issues, debt issues, all of that. So it's all tied into that, and I think that the policies that we have in place actually support people to, you know, an excellent level, and that we do the best we can within the context that we're working. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and I think it's a very useful point to locate those absence figures and within what else is happening in society at a particular point in time, and particularly at this time. Okay, I don't see any other questions on the report, so can I draw us back to the recommendations and can I ask us to agree the report?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I'll come now to item 7, which is a report on the commissioning plan for services delivered by South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture and the performance framework that will sit behind that, and David Booth is going to speak to this report. David.
Thank you very much, Chair. The purpose of this report is to present the proposed format and timing of the new performance reports aligned to the commissioning plan for services delivered by South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture for the period from 2025 to 2027. In terms of background, the commissioning plan was approved by Executive Committee on the 25th of June of this year, with the first plan covering the period from 2025 to 27, with future iterations spanning a 5-year period to align with each new council plan. It was agreed that a performance framework would underpin the commissioning plan to monitor how our ask of SLLC is impacting on the people and communities of South Lanarkshire. And Section 4 of the report outlines how information will be gathered to inform, support and influence future decision making. Integral to this will be the monitoring and reporting on outcomes aligned to the commissioning plan, and Section 5 of the report proposes the format and timing of this reporting. Principally, it will be proposed that an overarching annual report is provided each year to the Community and Enterprise Resources Committee on SLLC's performance against the commissioning plan. The key aim of the report will be to demonstrate how the Council's ask of SLLC is impacting on the people of South Lanarkshire. In addition to standard performance and financial information, SLLC will be asked to incorporate a range of case studies within the report and use infographics to highlight SLLC's key achievements against council priorities and outcomes. It is proposed that the first of the annual improvement outcome reports will be presented to the Community and Enterprise Committee on the 10th of November 2026, in order that SLLC's year-end financial position can be provided. To supplement the overarching annual report, it is proposed that interim area-focused reports and presentations are delivered to each of the 4 area committees once per year to share progress and to highlight key achievements, issues and challenges on an area-by-area basis. The proposed reporting dates for 2026 are contained in Section 5.8 of the report. Sections 5.9 to 5.12 and Appendix 1 provide some examples of the type of information that can be reported on, and the intention is to hone this reporting information as part of the reporting process in the lead up to the full commissioning plan being developed in 2027. There are no material employee, financial or other implications within the report, and the reporting proposals have been discussed and agreed with the SLLC board. With that, I draw committee's attention to the recommendations in Section 2 of the report and ask committee to approve the proposal for developing and presenting future outcome-focused performance reports, that the outcome-focused performance reports be presented to Community Enterprise Resources Committee in November or December of each year, and that interim area-focused performance reports be presented to the area committees in May and June of each year. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, David. Can I ask if there are any questions in that report? And could I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thanks very much for that useful report. I wanted to ask a bit more about with the area reports, will they cover how we're going to monitor the the Calderglen and Chatelherault Country Park master plans? What monitoring will be in place to monitor that in relation to what the public said in the consultation of what they're looking for from their country parks?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Councillor Rob. The idea of being area reports is so that there can be more of a kind of more targeted discussions and engagement on areas that would be local to an area. So something like the Calderglen Master Plan might be an area that we would focus on. South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture already gather a range of information over and above the LGBF information. They gather information and customer satisfaction across a range of areas and activities in the country parks. So that's something that can absolutely be incorporated and discussed as part of that process.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Alec Allison.
Good report in terms of the reporting back afterwards. One of the issues that I think could also be in this is actually identifying if there are service changes that the Leisure Trust intend to make. The example I would give you is last year I wasn't aware that they were withdrawing funding from all the locally managed halls. I think completely, but I'm not certain. That was a significant delivery change, and I certainly wasn't aware of it. Apologies if I missed it somewhere, but is that not something that should be part of this, is that they give us advance warning of any of these service changes?
Thanks very much. Absolutely, Councillor Allison. That's one of the areas we're looking at is about reporting performance up to a point and then also projecting ahead. So again, for example, when we talk about the area committee reports, the idea would be to inform the area committees of what's been happening up until the period of reporting, but also what's projected to happen ahead. And that could include a range of activities that are happening in the area, but also any proposals that might impact on delivery. So, and that would be the same for any of the reports.
Okay, thank you. Could I maybe just come back to a point that was raised in response to Kirsten Robb's question, and it was about sort of 5.10 and 5.11 in the report, which is about the format of this reporting. So obviously we have those LGBF measures. I think those of us who are most familiar, and particularly those of us who are members of the Performance and Review Scrutiny Forum, will often make the point that there is a limited sort of utility to some of these LGBF measures. You did make the point's made in the paper that members want to consider what other measures would be useful in advance of us moving to that full commissioning plan for 2027. I think it's useful to make that point in advance of 2027. I also think it's just useful to make that point now, that we know, as you said in your answer, David, that SLLC will record a huge amount of information about the customer experience across a range of services. And we might actually have measures that are more useful, more beneficial, more relevant and more reliable than what the LGBF is asking us to measure. So, for example, the point that was raised with me was around, say, sports facilities. But actually, sports facilities can cover a range of things, a range of venues and a range of services. So I do think we want to, as we're taking forward, not just the next commissioning plan, but taking forward the reporting to committees, I think we want to think about what is a good menu of indicators to put in front of elected members that goes beyond the LGBF. I think partly through scrutiny and accountability, but partly just through just because we have access to a wealth of information that would be useful to share. I think it would be beneficial to include that in future reports. So, are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any other questions, so can I draw us back to the recommendations and ask us to agree the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. Move now to items for noting. So item 8 is a paper on updating us on commercial opportunities. So can I ask Alison Brown to speak to this paper? Alison?
Good morning and thank you. This is the regular 6-monthly report providing an update on commercial opportunities being explored by the Council. Town centre activity for East Kilbride and Hamilton is set out in section 4, Notably, and as previously approved by committee, we're working on the transfer date of the 30th of December for the transfer of Centre West and East Kilbride to the council. Officers are working on the various work streams, including vacant possession, demolition, design development of a civic hub and a new residential neighbourhood. In respect of the residential neighbourhood, soft market testing has been undertaken with house builders to explore delivery options. And the response from house builders has been very positive, and a further report will be brought back to this committee on the preferred delivery model. In respect of Hamilton, an external project management team has been appointed to assist with the delivery of the master plan and to realise its opportunities. Section 5 highlights inward investment activity, and in August, committee approved the disposal of Langlands West in East Kilbride to a data centre developer. Legal agreements are being prepared, and the developer is currently preparing a grid application, application connection. In recent months, there has also been interest in the council's Canderside site in Lark Hall for industrial development. In respect of commercial developments, tenders are being assessed for 2 industrial units to be built at Cathcart Road in Rutherglen, which should be on site early in 2026. As part of the asset review, there is an opportunity to dispose of commercial and industrial properties which are no longer viable. In addition, consideration is being given to financing the acquisition of modern industrial units or sites in pressurised locations to respond to market demand. And a further paper will be brought back to this committee on that matter in February. Film and TV activity is set out in Section 6 and renewable energy activity in Section 7, including the feasibility of a heat network for the Bothwell Road and Almada Street area, which will be completed in March next year. And turning back to the recommendation, I'd ask committee to note the report.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in this paper? Can I come to Ross Clark?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to Alison for the report. On page 67, 5.4, in relation to the council-owned site at Canderside at Lark Hall, bearing in mind any commercial sensitivities, is there any update that can be provided on this, please?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Yes, I'm conscious of the commercial sensitivity, but we have had significant market interest from a number of parties for the Canderside site, and that's not the Roads Depot site, that's a site adjacent to that. And they are looking at different types of industrial development, some for expansion of business opportunities and some for movement into the South Lanarkshire area. So I'm reflecting on that interest, but equally we know through the Ryden report that there is market demand across South Lanarkshire and indeed in that Lark Hall area. And is that an opportunity for potentially the council to build industrial units at our own hand? So that will be part of that paper that I'll bring back to this committee in February for further consideration.
Thank you. Can I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thanks for your work in this area, Alison. I wanted to ask a bit about the renewable energy stuff. Obviously, there's a number of projects at different stages, and we're just thinking about moving those on to the next stages of feasibility and then like full business case in more detail, particularly for the one for this building. We've just invested in a new boiler, but we need to keep moving towards net zero. How do we, with that project reporting in the end of March, how do we have a pot of funding already identified to take it forward to a business case, including, is there a pipeline so we can make sure we keep moving these projects along, a pot of funding available to do that?
Thank you, Councillor Robb. Yes, working with colleagues in Housing and Technical Resources on that particular project, and as part of the feasibility study that will be looking at the business case as well as the delivery model, which is important, and how that project may be funded. And ideally where we want to get that to is potentially a position that we can apply for external grant funding to UK and or Scottish Government, because it is a large investment. We're working with Scottish Water Horizon as a potential partner, but one of the issues that we need to consider as a council is our role in that. So are we looking to take energy from that district heating network, or is there an opportunity for us to actually run that district heating network? So that's all of those conversations are in that mix, and in due course a report would come back to committee.
Thank you. Just to be supplementary, it was more, thanks very much for the further detail. It's a kind of general point about, a few budgets ago, we put in an innovation fund to make sure there was a pot of money available to help move these projects to more detailed phases so that we can secure the external funding. Do we have any money left in that pot? And it sounds to me like we need some money in a similar pot to make sure we keep moving these things forward.
I would need to come back to you in the detail of the Innovation Fund, but we have also supplemented it from the climate monies as well, so there's some feasibility monies in that. Developing these projects takes time and can be costly because we need to bring in external consultants. So that undoubtedly over time, we will need more money, but I'm happy to review where we are with the various budgets and come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, could I come to Alec Allison?
Thanks, Chair. I think it's a very important paper we've got here, because every pound that we make through commercial activity is a pound less we need to raise elsewhere. Good to hear what you were saying about the council supporting areas for business, if you like. What I would like, I'm going to be very parochial. Ward 3, I do not think there is a single council site available for businesses to access. I'll apologise if I'm wrong, but I honestly can't think of one, and that's 40% of the geographic area of South Lanarkshire. So just because there's not a high density population, I wouldn't wish them to continue to be forgotten about. Second point is the film and TV opportunities. You've highlighted that we've worked on a pan-Lanarkshire basis, but I'm also, I think, aware that the Leisure Trust are involved in this type of work as well. So what work is being done to make sure that there's not a conflict between the two and we're just running each other down?
Thank you. In respect of your first point around Ward 3, I will review the Ryden report that analysed all the localities. But that comes back to my point that we need to be exploring what opportunities there are for the council to potentially acquire sites, purchase other buildings across the patch, because we know that their demand is there for particularly smaller start-up type units. In respect of film and TV, we have been working very closely with South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture. So when an inquiry comes in, we liaise directly with them to see who is best placed to pick that one up. And in some instances, we've been working closely with them, activity in Calderglen, with some filming up there. That was jointly led by both ourselves and South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture. So we are across that particular issue.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up. So the financial benefit from that, who gets it and where's it seen?
So if the filming is within South Lanarkshire Council property, that money comes to the council. If it is within a South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture location, it goes to the Leisure Trust. So I think within the report I have said, I think it's 61,000 that we have brought in since Community and Enterprise have taken over this activity.
Sorry, I missed that.
Okay, could I come to David Shearer?
Thank you, Chair. 2 points. On the green investment, would it be possible to take some funding from the Renewable Energy Fund to fund these projects? I don't know if that would be technically feasible. And on the point that Councillor Allison raised about industrial units and the like in the rural area, surely that is dependent on the local plan that's going through the process at the moment. that land should be released and earmarked for industrial units, which we could then, using the good offices of the council, take forward as future development opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer. In respect of the Renewable Energy Fund, yes, in theory, if there is a project within a Renewable Energy Fund area, then that could be a suitable project. Likewise, we are looking at the Renewable Energy Fund at a sort of more strategic level, and just wondering whether that fund could be working a wee bit harder for wider projects. And that's a piece of work that I've got officers are working on, and ultimately we will bring back to committee for consideration. In respect of local development plan, absolutely been working with colleagues in planning to ensure that they are fully aware of the pressures for industrial land across South Lanarkshire, and that is reflected in the evidence report for the local development plan.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a few remarks. The first would be around that last point about industrial property. Industrial land, I suppose, and industrial property. But when it comes to industrial property, we know, and I think that's the key point that comes out of this report, we know there is demand for units within South Lanarkshire. I think it's a particular issue around East Kilbride and Hamilton, and the availability isn't there across the private sector's estate. I think there is a time when Scottish Enterprise would have been at the table and would have been contributing to fixing that problem. I've got a meeting, it has to be said, with Scottish Enterprise tomorrow, where I want to understand more about their plans going forward. But we can evidence that there's a problem, and I think we have a responsibility in some form to move people forward to a solution, and whether that is the council stepping in directly, or it's the council facilitating some wider change in that the kind of property, the business ecosystem out there in South Lanarkshire. It has to be done because we're missing out on opportunities if we don't. Can I also just make a general point about the paper? I think it's really encouraging and really reassuring to hear about the work that Alison's service are doing. I think there is a level of ambition that sits behind those proposals that I'm delighted we're embracing as a local authority, and it is in a lot of cases putting South Lanarkshire on the map, and that's what we want to do. There are big challenges out there, but there is big ambition that sits behind all of these commercial opportunities that's been identified. And it may be the opportune moment to just reflect that we've got a lot of the space to do that as a council because of the restructuring of community and enterprise that took place, and the driving force behind that restructuring of community and enterprise resources was David Booth. And it has just occurred to me a moment ago that this will be David's last meeting of the executive committee after a long time in local government and a long time with this council. So before we move on, I just want to take the opportunity to recognise David's sort of service and support to all the members of the committee and all the members of the council, and all his service to South Lanarkshire Council through many years. So thank you, David. Can I bring us back to the recommendations and ask us to note the report? Agreed. We're agreed. Thank you. And I'll move on to item 9, which is on cost of living support, and ask Craig Ferguson to speak to this paper. Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Since the start of the cost of living crisis, reports have been provided to the committee outlining a range of measures in place across council services to support households in managing the effects. The report provides an update on activity taking place, with section 4 of the report providing detail of the services that have been provided. The Council's Minimus Advice Service continues to support households to maximise their income, provide emergency support, and also provide advice on managing debt. In September, the service supported over 7,000 new clients, achieved a financial gain over £14.5 million through a combination of welfare gains and also supporting the write-off of debt. The Services Community Wellbeing Team provided referrals for energy vouchers and food bank support, with 97% receiving support on the same day they contacted the service. The team also delivered the Council's Cash First scheme, issued over 8,700 vouchers to a value of £438,000 over the period of the scheme. In addition, the service continues to work with a range of partners to enhance support for residents, including employability services, Macmillan and also NHS Lanarkshire. Section 4.2 outlines the support provided by benefits and revenues, including provision of council tax reduction and also ongoing support from the Scottish Welfare Fund. Housing services continues to support tenants with rent arrears, and this can include the provision of financial assistance from the Tenancy Sustainment Fund, helping for 300 households with awards totalling nearly £200,000. School meal debt of £191,000 is written off relating to debt over 4,000 children, and work very much continues to support families in hardship. And the introduction of school meals for children in receipt of the Scottish Child Payment from February of this year provides further support for families. Section 4.5 provides an update on the provision of support by food banks across South Lanarkshire. In the 6 months to September, the number of adults fed through emergency food parcels fell by 5.2%, where the number of children supported increased by 13.5%. Food banks continue to look at alternatives to food parcels and cash-first approaches to meet demand, with 379 vouchers issued to buy fresh food and vegetables during the first 6 months of the year. The Council's Winter Wishes programme to support care-experienced young people is delivered by South Lanarkshire for the past 3 years. And the Promise Board agreed in March 2025 to set aside £40,000 to continue Winter Wishes for this year. Section 4.7 of the report outlines the work done by Education Resources around the cost of the school day, with a parental survey issued in May with over 1,500 responses provided. The results provide insights into the experiences and perspectives of families regarding school-related costs. The survey revealed that 79% disagreed with the statement that schools are asking for too much money, indicating most schools are actively trying to limit the financial burden on families. In terms of overall outlook, SEBS will continue to provide a broad range of valuable support to many households across South Lanarkshire, where the cost of living does remain high, with prices continuing to increase. I can refer committee back to the recommendations at Section 2 and ask that the support provided in helping households manage the effects of the cost of living crisis be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Craig. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? Can I come to Robert Brown?
Thanks very much, Chair. It's a very interesting and helpful report, if I may say so. 2 points, if I may. On the school support thing, I mean, I go, as many other colleagues will do, no doubt, to various local parent councils. And I'm very much struck by the reports we get in terms of the work that they do in supporting the cost of the school day. You know, the whole climate of the way in which these things are now dealt with in terms of uniform support and outings and all the rest of it is significantly different to what it was a year or two ago. And I do think there's a very considerable success story with regard to all of that. The other point, though, is really echoes from that the voluntary sector, we approved the voluntary sector partnership arrangements at the last meeting, are also quite significant players in this particular field. I'm struck by the fact that the cost of living support mentions money matters, but makes no particular reference, other than a by-blow at the end, to the Citizen Advice Bureau or to other organisations active in the field. And considerable financial gains are also made by the CABs, their outreach services, and by other organisations in that way as well. Would it be possible in future reports to, if you like, echo the spirit of the third sector report partnership and include some reference to this sort of thing in it, on which we do have figures, because we report periodically from the CAB and from other bodies to the Council on their client statistics and the like. These have been going up very substantially over the course of the last period.
Thank you for your points there, Councillor. On the first point, acknowledging obviously there's a lot of work done by colleagues from education. The report itself obviously refers as well to the collaboration with the Education Scotland Attainment Advisor, the selection of 20 schools. They'll participate in a more detailed examination of the cost of school day practices. So in relation to the work we do with the voluntary sector, the work they do themselves, I think that's fairly extensive. I think there's a good track record there in terms of close cooperation between Money Matters Advice and the CABs. The report itself refers to the Council's cash first approach in the scheme we had there supporting residents. That scheme involved taking referrals from CABs, so essentially just ensuring that joined up approach works very well to the benefit of residents, providing cash in this particular instance. And on your point around information, we have got information from CABs in particular. There's obviously a level of overlap in terms of the services and results that they provide in comparison to those provided by our own internal Women Matters Advice Service, and happy to reflect that in future reports.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Could I come to Maureen Chalmers?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you. Part of my question was very similar to what Robert was saying round about. I know in the past, during the pandemic, I remember we added in the food banks and the CAB data, and I think it was to the Community Planning Partnership though, rather than the Council report, but it was very, very useful. I attended the Hamilton CAB AGM a few weeks ago, and they've got the same issues, rising demand for energy and food support particularly. So the question I was going to ask in addition to that though, and I would agree that we need to see that data alongside everything else in the spirit of the agreement we've set up with the voluntary sector. I think the other question I have is, I'm very aware locally, I'm sure others are too, that there's a rising demand from people for support with food in particular, but also energy costs and other supports from people who in the past, you know, have never needed to support. And there's also, I'm seeing the Hamilton District Food Bank, which is fantastic. It's quite robust and it's always had really good support. But they're now calling out on a weekly basis for additional stock. So I'm just wondering, well, this report's really helpful. Are we aware of current kind of trends locally across South Lanarkshire and maybe where hotspots are, or where we need to maybe think about what we can do more with our third sector partners? And perhaps just as a kind of final point, shouting out in our community-based organisations who don't do, and our faith groups, our churches, etc., who do lots and lots of work to support communities informally. But I'm just wondering if we've got any understanding, any intelligence, if you like, locally of these kind of trends.
Thank you, Councillor. I think so. The report itself at section 4.5 does always indicate, you know, in some senses, just that level of pressure the local food banks are under, albeit it's not uniform across all food banks across the area. And obviously, in terms of the number of children being fed through emergency food parcels, that increase there is obviously of some concern. Certainly anecdotally, we are aware obviously of donations probably reducing to food banks. It's like a national issue as opposed to one that's confined necessarily to South Lanarkshire. I'd probably defer as well to Tom on this one, as he wants to come in. I know certainly Jen has a lot of engagement with local food banks, so she may be able to assist with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Chalmers, for the question. We know there's evidence nationally about a drop in food donations to food banks, and there was a survey from the Independent Food Network last year which showed 80% of food banks across the UK were suggesting they were getting drops in the amount of food being donated, and indeed cash donations in most cases as well. We don't have specific data from the local food banks, but they do feed back to us on an annual basis. And I think when we asked the 7 last year, about 4 identified this as a problem. So we know, at very least anecdotally, that they believe that food donations are down locally. Now, there could be many, many reasons for that. One I would suggest might be that people perhaps themselves don't feel able to donate as much as they did in previous years. As you know, the Council does not directly fund food banks at this time. We have previously on an occasional basis, but there are means by which we do assist the food banks. Through just in the last year alone, for example, some food banks have benefited from PB money. The local action fund funded at least one food bank I can remember in the last few months as well. So there are means by which we do contribute to them. And referring back to the third sector grants policy that, as you both referenced, was passed by approved by the committee last time. Most, I think probably all food banks are run by what we'd regard as being properly constituted third sector organisations. So they would be able to apply for grants through the new approved policy. And these are grants that are from £1,000 to £20,000, so it's reasonable sums. And in a case like food emergencies, the policy allows for direct awards rather than competitive awards. So there are means by which we can, and you might think should, be able to assist these organisations going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. It might be, so I think a point's been made by both previous questions, which I think is quite useful. As I recall, I think the genesis of this paper comes from in 2022, I did say it would be useful to, at that time, obviously when the real grip of the cost of living crisis, given all the events that were taking place at that time. And I recall asking for a paper that brought together all the support provided through the council at that time, just to help explain this to members and understand what our response was. That's not to take away from everything else that's happening out there in the community. I think Councillor Chalmers is right. There's a similar process of reporting through the Community Planning Partnership. So I think in terms of developing this paper, I think that's why there is such a focus on money matters, etc. But it might be useful there for future reports to be clear, be absolutely clear about what the support is we provide as a local authority, because it's important, but clearly the way we address these issues going forward, well, through national changes and societal changes, but is also through at the local level, the relationships we build and the partnerships we build. So we can, I think the commitment's been given there to update the paper and reflect that in future versions of the paper when they come to committee. Could I come to, I've got 3 other questions, I'll come to them all. Could I come to Susan Kerr?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the report. Yeah, very interesting. I just want to actually, it's not a question, just want to congratulate the Council for its proactive initiatives to support residents during rising costs of living pressures. The measures demonstrate strong leadership and a commitment to community well-being of this Council.
Thank you. Can I come to Margaret Walker?
Just to say that in relation to this, Councillor Cowie and I and Michael Shanks attended a round table with all of the food banks in the Rutherglen constituency and both the voluntary sector and the council services as outlined in this paper, including Money Matters. I think Dana was there, the development officer for all of this stuff in relation to food banks, the CAB, the Citizens Advice Bureau, and it was a round table really to discuss all of these issues. And they did highlight the same things as people have highlighted here, the rising demand, and yes, that they could access funding and funding grants, but that could sometimes be quite a complex process, and they welcomed the development of the partnership, where all of that information relating to funding sources, I think, is going to be put on the one website. So the roundtable was a good opportunity to talk to them about that and make sure that they know how to access that. And I know that, I think it's Dana and other members of staff that were there from Money Matters are actually working to ensure that that happens. But it was a really good session, and it would be good if that continued through the partnership and that those local relationships developed through that. But yeah, there is, good local work, joint working in relation to the provision of food banks, but they did reflect the same concerns. And obviously there was discussion about, a whole range of factors and socio-economic factors, which unfortunately is still creating this situation. And hopefully we will, tackle some of that through employment policies and through education and attainment, and hopefully we will be in the position in a few years' time where those food banks won't be as vital as they are at the moment. But certainly there's good linkages in Rutherglen Campus Lang, and we're well aware of what the voluntary sector does, so it would be good if it was reflected in this as well. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Jerry Convery?
Yeah. Important part of the report. Everybody's united. It's a disgrace. Poverty is a stigma in society. Shouldn't be there. But I've just got to say, 4.12, we get £13.5 million in benefits and welfare stuff to people. That's the thing. We're doing our job and we're doing it right. So thanks very much to everybody involved.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask us to note the report? I'm very conscious of time and that we have a private business to get through. So could I just come to item... I'll come to item 10, and my proposal would be to take a break before we get into the next chunk of business. So, Tom, could I ask you to pick up item 10, which is a programme for government report, and it's an item for voting. Tom.
Thanks, Chair. Happy to do that. Yep. So we bring this report to the committee every year. We've been doing that for about 6 years now, I think. And what it does is it provides a summary each year of the Scottish Government's Programme for Government. So in this case, it's 25-26 Programme for Government. The detail is, as ever, in the appendix, where we provide a resource-by-resource narrative of how the Council is approaching those elements in the Programme for Government which are relevant to local government, and it's a good chunk of it, as you might expect. Now, we provide that under each of the Scottish Government's 4 key priorities, which are there at 3.2 in your papers. They are eradicating child poverty, growing the economy, tackling the climate emergency, and ensuring high quality and sustainable public services. Of those 4 key priorities, the Scottish Government has identified its top priority as eradicating child poverty. So you'll note at 4.3 in this report that tackling early years and child poverty has been chosen as a focus of the Marmot pilot project that the Council is involved with as part of the Collaborating for Health Equity in Scotland programme. 4.4 in the report provides a list of new bills introduced by the Scottish Government in 25-26, and that is the report here for noting. Happy to take any questions, but there may be others around the table who are better placed than me if it's specific about services. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Are there any questions on that report? I'm not seeing any. It is just for noting, so can we agree to note the report? If it's all right, I would like to take a comfort break at this point and have us return here maybe in 10 minutes' time to take the remaining item for noting and the private item of business, if that's okay. Back at 11:30. Okay, folks, that's gone half past. We'll restart the meeting and restart the recording, which I think is now restarted. Could I come to item 11, which is a report on the Integration Joint Board's annual performance report, and Suman Sengupta is going to speak to this item. Suman.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So the report in front of you relates to the South Lanarkshire Integration Joint Board Annual Performance Report, as the Chair has highlighted. Section 3.1 sets out the legislative basis for this, with 3.3 highlighting that the appended annual report has been presented to and approved by the South Lanarkshire IGB at its meeting of the 23rd of September. As set out within Section 4, this high-level strategic performance review sits alongside a raft of other routine performance reporting presented to the Integration Joint Board and indeed its Performance and Audit Subcommittee on an annual basis and indeed on a meeting-by-meeting basis. 4.2 highlights the development of this document, has reflected feedback from a range of sources, including the external auditors, and that's then led to a greater emphasis on succinctness and clarity, connectivity, visual accessibility, and ensuring the content is an appropriate strategic level. Moreover, it's supported by a range of additional online materials, some of which is further appended to the report in front of you. Further, as highlighted within 4.6, as a matter of best practice, notable achievements are now presented as video inserts rather than as text within the report, which has also allowed us to share these through other mechanisms, including social media, alongside the publication itself. Having said all that, I would take you back to the recommendation of the Section 2 and happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? Eileen Logan.
Chair, not so much a question, but it's easy for us to sit here or anywhere and we only receive problems and different things and then we feel very negative. But I think it's only right that we thank Suman and all the team who have the hard work of the Integrated Joint Board. They are the people who have to make a penny stretch to a pound, basically. And it's very, very difficult, and it has been very, very difficult. Now, we still have lots of problems. We still will be moaning and groaning and complaining. But in actual fact, I wouldn't like the job that they do. And it is a very, very difficult job. But they do work very hard. The whole team, not just Suman. Well, he's the head of the house, I suppose, but everybody, and I think it's only right that we acknowledge that and we do take back to the staff in particular what they have to do, as I say, stretch a penny into a pound. And it's not going to, we know for a fact it's not going to get any easier. It's actually just getting worse and will be worse. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I come to Maureen Chalmers?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to welcome the annual report and thank them and the team for the work they do behind this. It tells a story. I think the new format is very public friendly, which is really what we want to do. But I think significantly behind that, I want to also thank Suman for making sure there are that kind of whole series of members aware, members share sessions, seminars, briefings that we get, so that we get in as members of the IGB, we get in behind that and can understand the details. So thanks very much, Simon.
Thank you. And I think from my own point, I would reflect what the previous speakers have said. I think the report is quite user friendly. But also still the information is still there that we needed to do that candid assessment of the IGB's performance. So I think the balance that's struck in that report and in the kind of public facing part of the report is right and all very welcome. So I don't see any other questions. Can we just agree to note the report? I'll come now to item 12 is urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. Item 13 relates to the exclusion of the press and public. So, as the remaining items of business may involve the likely disclosure of exempt information in terms of paragraphs 1, 6 and 8 of Part 1 of the Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act, members are asked to agree that the press and public be excluded from the meeting for those items of business.
Agreed.
We're agreed. So members who are participating via Confero should be in a secure private location with no other people present in the room, and no one should be able to hear or view the proceedings. I'm just going to ask the clerk